Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we started recording episodes virtually instead of being in the same room together. This created technical issues for us for many weeks. Our sound issues get better beginning with the pros and cons episode. In the meantime, we appreciate your patience with the sound issues that are present in this episode.
This episode contains material that might be triggering for some. If you need to stop the podcast at any time to take care of yourself, please do so.
If you need support, you can call the 24/7 National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hi, everyone! It's time for a Q&A episode! Yippee! We love Q&A episodes, and we are doing this one with not as much time in between as there was between the second and the third one that we did. Yes, exactly. That is exciting that we're getting to this sooner rather than later. So, let's kick it off with the first email. Take it away, Kate.
Okie dokie. Let's see. Good morning. I am a registered mental health nurse and work at an acute inpatient mental health unit for children and adolescents all the way over in Australia. I've been listening to your podcast recently to learn more about DBT in order to develop a greater understanding of the best evidence-based treatment for people with BPD, which I think you mentioned before is borderline personality disorder.
Yep.
As much as our facility does not encourage long admissions due to developing dependency on the service, I think it is still so essential to have some DBT skills under my belt to be able to provide a therapeutic approach. I'm just asking some advice on how to help people in crisis on the ward. Often the limits we set to maintain safety and appropriate behavior create a certain dislike towards nurses, so I won't lie, I find it difficult to help someone in crisis when they have such a negative opinion of us. The emotion dysregulation, impulsivity, self-harming, and extreme anger is often in response to our limit setting. I'm aware this is a defense mechanism and learned a familiar response for them. You touched on it well in Emotions Part 2, I believe, where when someone is in crisis or when they are self-harming, they're flooded with anxiety, anger, embarrassment, shame. It seems this isn't an appropriate time to try and discuss DBT techniques with them, unless they have already learned these and I just perhaps need to reinforce this. Do you think the best way to manage is to validate their emotions and provide suggestions for distraction techniques in order for them to appropriately regulate their emotions, and then perhaps when they are more settled, debrief and reflect on their response? We had an incident the other day where I set some limits of which someone was not exactly happy with, and I could see her absolutely switch into her fight or flight response. It was horrible. I don't see how we could have responded differently, however. I could relate to her. My limbic system absolutely kicks in when I'm overwhelmed. However, I guess I'm at the stage where I'm able to recognize this and control, in quotes, my emotions more so. How do I help people in direct crisis when they are literally hurling abuse towards us or banging their head, cutting, fashioning a noose? What are your most effective distraction techniques? I find telling someone to breathe, although amazingly beneficial, such a degrading thing. Is that it though? There we go, I can read. Is that it though? Breathing helps regulate your anxiety levels in order to think more in your wise mind rather than emotional. Cheers.
Whew. I mean, my first thought when I read this email, I just flashed back to, which honestly was almost 10 years ago for me, but I flashed back to when I worked at the girls group home that I mentioned in episode 1. Even though, yes, it was not a hospital setting, these girls lived in this house, that had 6 bedrooms for 6 different girls. So different type of setting because it was more residential, as we put it. But I feel for you, listener, because I have been there with struggling with exactly what you're struggling with, which is how can I best de-escalate situations? How can I calm them down without invalidating them. And one of the first things that I remember learning when I went through before I even set foot in the group home, I had to go through training for how to restrain people. I had to go through de-escalation training. And one of the first things they talked about was giving commands that were 5 words or less, like keeping things really short and sweet, because exactly as you touched on and as you're recognizing, our brains can't process a whole lot when we're really escalated and overwhelmed. And the other thing that they taught us right away was to not use the term calm down, because that's a trigger. That's a trigger for a lot of people. And so I just want to say that I really feel for where you're coming from and how hard this is. And there's nothing that's going to be exactly a one-size-fits-all approach for every, patient that you're going to encounter. What may work really well for one person may not work at all for the next. So there isn't a one size fits all, but in general, I think you are right that it is really important to get them calmed down before discussing skills. Trying to give any kind of explicit directions on what to do or talking at them when they're overwhelmed is not going to get you anywhere. And you got to wait until they're back into a place more at baseline where they are more calm to be able to then give that information if it feels like it could be helpful and appropriate and like they're open to hearing it. So you're right about that. And so in terms of getting them calmed down, because I feel like that's your biggest question here of, how can I distract them? How can I calm them down when they're so escalated and overwhelmed? And, one thing like you mentioned, banging their head, cutting, yep, I remember all that stuff. And first and foremost, it's important to make sure that they are safe. Whatever protocols or procedures you've been taught to make sure to do that, that's the first thing. Make sure they're not banging their head anymore, that kind of a thing. But if they are physically safe, just really overwhelmed and not in a position where they want to talk to you, maybe they're swearing at you. I mean, I was called a bitch every day when I worked there. So, and you mentioned that too in your email, that you're really disliked. They don't like you guys. You're the authority figures. So what to do when they're not physically harming themselves anymore, but they're still really pissed off and escalated? Then what? And one thing that I really recommend that can be helpful is to try to get them to do something physical that's also healthy. I remember vividly, there was one girl who was at the group home when I first started working there. So I started working there and she'd already been there for a number of months. We had, thankfully, a pretty decent sized fenced in backyard, which I know you're not going to have at the hospital. But she would just pace. She would spend hours out in the yard just walking circles. Walking. But that was our biggest thing. When she got escalated, we were just like, go outside, go for a walk. That's what we would tell her to do. And she would just walk until she was calm. And again, that's not going to work for everyone. But if you have the ability to just walk, even if it's walking silently with them around the hospital wing, and if they're pissed off at you and they don't want you to walk with them, that's fine. They can walk on their own. But that can be something to maybe help calm them down, is to walk. Also, again, I don't know what's permitted in your hospital ward or anything like that. One of the ways that I really built rapport with the girls that I worked with, and again would be a way to help them open up, is that we would play cards together. That was a big thing that we would do. And part of this, I think, also comes down to figuring out how you build rapport with these patients when they are calm. Making sure that you have a relationship with them so that when they do get escalated, they'll maybe have some trust in you already. And I guess I feel like I'm saying a lot, but the final thing that I'll say before I turn it over to you, Kate, is that I can't also emphasize enough how important it is to, I guess, use kindness and respect. I had it at one point when I was working at the group home. It was a really stressful time. Lots of stressful girls, lots of staff turnover. It was really stressful. And I was stressed a lot of times going into work. And one of the girls said to me at one point, at first I wanted to disregard what she was saying and brush it off, but I actually listened to her and realized it was true. And she said, Michelle, you're mean to us. And I was kind of like, well, what do you mean? Like, I don't want to be mean, but when you don't do what you're supposed to do, you know, then I kind of have to be. And she's like, no, you never tell me when I'm doing a good job. You never tell me thank you. Basically, I was so stressed that I had let politeness kind of go out the window. I was more of a drill sergeant than I wanted to be. And when I actually listened to what she said, I was like, you know, she's right. And I started trying to do that more from that day forward, of like when they were doing what I asked them to do, of saying thank you, of trying to validate when I saw them doing something well. I just tried as best I could, even when they were misbehaving and driving me nuts, to still exercise politeness. To still sometimes say, please, hey, please, can you put your dishes away before you go do that? And it got me a lot further than just being like, put your dishes in the sink. It really did. So that may be something too, to just, see if there's any of that could be going on within yourself or within other people on your team, when maybe if you really look at it, they're not speaking to the patients with much respect or common decency. And patients do respond to that, whether it's there or whether it's not there, you're going to get some kind of a reaction. And so that may be helpful too, as hard as it is in those moments, to really make sure that you're responding with kindness and respect at all times, even when you're really overwhelmed. And to see if that helps with building a rapport so that they maybe do trust you a little more when things are in a really bad spot. Okay. I'm gonna shut up now. Kate, what are your thoughts on this listener's email?
Yeah, no, I think I don't know, Michelle, it makes perfect sense to me that you would have a lot to say on this because you were in such a similar situation. I've not really been in those kinds of situations myself professionally, but first and foremost, I do just want to echo what the listener said and what you said. It is right, trying to focus on skills, especially a lot of DBT skills can be kind of really brainy, right? Really prefrontal cortex kind of stuff, and that's just not the time to be doing that. So I agree with you that the listener's right about not doing that. But mostly what I was thinking about is what things are useful other than, telling someone to breathe. My favorite thing, if this is to do when a client looks like they're, really in crisis or really kind of maybe dissociating or other things to help them get out of the space they're in their brain. This might sound silly, but I said ask them what their favorite ice cream is. It's just a complete non sequitur. It has nothing to do with anything that we've been doing. Sometimes I can see them literally shake their head and trying to get their brain on track to be able to answer the question what? Oh, what's your favorite ice cream? And then just keep going in that vein. What's your favorite ice cream? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite season? What's your favorite smell, right? Positive things, talking about things that they like. And just derailment, right? The goal there is just to completely derail their brain from whatever track it was going down. And I have been amazed at how quickly this can help people regulate themselves. They're not even trying to regulate themselves, right? It's not you being like, do the thing so you feel better. It just naturally results in them feeling better. So that's one thing. Another thing I was thinking about, and Michelle, this I think ties in well with your idea of building rapport when they're calmer, is also talk about distraction cues, set up cues when they're calm that then you can call on when they're in crisis. A couple of other really good kind of grounding techniques that I like other than breathing are having someone just count, literally just count as fast as they can. Sometimes even out loud, right? This keeps more of your brain occupied than you might think. There's always the classic, name 5 things that you can see, 5 things you can, right, whatever, right? Or find how many triangles can you find in this room, or, things like that. But you don't want to have to explain that whole skill in the middle of a crisis, or it's just as, inappropriately timed as, a lot of DBT stuff would be. So you'd want to set those, things up with the patient ahead of time, so then when they are in crisis, you can just say something like counting or 5 things, right? A little short cue, like you were talking about, Michelle, 5 words or fewer. So when they're in that really heightened state. And sort of, I don't know, last but not least, I totally get how telling someone to breathe can come across as a bit, I don't know, condescending, a little bit too close to calm down. So a way that I like to get around that but still utilize the efficacy of breathing is to say, let's breathe together, right? That also is building rapport, it's building connection, and you're certainly not talking down to them because you're going to be doing it with them, right? So let's breathe together, and then you can just model the breathing. You don't even have to count, right? Mirror neurons will help them sync up with you anyway. So just by connecting with them and modulating your own breathing, that will help to start regulate their breathing and bring them to a better place. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, perfect. Nice thoughts. Good ideas. I like the ice cream question.
I don't know how I thought about it the first time, but it's like a go-to for me now.
Maybe you were just hungry for ice cream and that's what it was. All right. So this next one says, hi, Kate and Michelle. I don't have access to a DBT group locally right at the moment, but I would love to read some DBT books and or workbooks that are suitable for self-help. Can you please give me some suggestions? Thanks a lot. Kate, do you have some suggestions for this listener?
Seriously, the 2 things that I think about are neither of them really DBT books or workbooks, but I swear they're still helpful. One is actually a memoir called The Buddha and the Borderline, and I found that just really, I don't know, a really powerful, something I could connect with a lot when I read it, and I don't know, I just thought it was really well written and very hopeful. And I feel like a lot of stuff around around like borderline personality stuff can be not so hopeful. So I don't know if that's the listener's diagnosis or anything like that, but if it happens to be, I really liked that book. Second of all, I thought, listener, you might want to consider like looking at online courses. It's not quite the same as actually being in a group, but it can get really in-depth, often have, videos and reading material and stuff like that. The one that comes to me off the top of my head, and I always hate sounding like I'm repping some sort of product, I swear to God, I don't have anything to do with them. But there's a place with a lot of online courses called Udemy, Udemy, and I know that they have at least a couple, 2 or 3 of the DBT modules available as courses that you can take, and it has a ton of material and videos and things like that. So those were kind of the first things that came to me. What about you, Michelle? Yeah,
that sounds awesome. And one of the workbooks that we really commonly recommend, and I just say, look for the light green cover. So if you Google this or put this on Amazon, you'll be able to find it. But the title is so generic that you want to make sure you pick the one with the light green cover. But the title of it is the Dialectical Behavior Therapy Skills Workbook. So
that's the one I had to buy when I went through my DBT.
Yeah, it's been around a long time. It's kind of like the tried and true workbook. But yeah, we like that one. You can work through, I'm trying to remember, I feel like oddly it puts like interpersonal effectiveness skills first in the workbook. Maybe it does mindfulness and then interpersonal effectiveness. And again, you can do the DBT skills in any order that you want. There is not a right or wrong order, though Kate and I tend to put off interpersonal effectiveness more towards the end, just because it's taking it from your individual stuff to then interacting with other people, which feels like a step up. But you can work through that workbook in any order that you want. You can just pick a certain skill in the table of contents, go to it, and it's going to have a little bit for you to read about the skill and then some kind of activity or suggestions for how to use it, either within the workbook or giving you basically some ideas for how to use it in your real life. So that's a good workbook that, again, I think is probably the most popular one in the DBT community, I would say. The other one that I thought of, which I had a client actually show me this one a little while ago. I had never heard of it, and I liked it when I saw it. It's called the Stronger Than BPD Journal. And it says on the cover that it's specifically for women, I believe, but looking at it, I did not read it cover to cover. She brought it into session to me. I skimmed through it and kind of gave it a look over to be like, oh, what is this? Does this seem good? And it's a journal, right? So there's a lot of blank pages, a lot of prompting questions, but that can maybe be a helpful format if you're having a really hard day and you're trying to get yourself grounded again and to take some time to reflect on what's going on. That may be a good thing as well. And even though it did say it was specifically for women, I don't think I really saw anything explicitly in the journal that seemed gendered. I think that might just be how they're marketing it. So I think it could be more widely applicable to people of all gender identities. But so yeah, that one is the Stronger Than BPD Journal. And I liked that one. So yeah, hopefully that gets you started, listener. Yeah.
Okie dokie, are you ready for the next one?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, dokie. So this one says, hello girls, I'd like to tell you that you are doing a great job in your DBT and Me podcasts. When I was looking for some English resources about DBT, I didn't expect to find such a logical, transparent, and practical channel as yours. I'm pausing in the middle and saying, aw, thank you.
I know, it's so sweet.
Alright, moving on. I was referred to psychotherapy by my neurologist because of having neurological functional disorders, but without any emotional problems. Nothing more than everyone experiences from day to day. After a few months of so-called psychotherapy, I was on the edge of depression, suffering because of invalidating therapy, tiredness, insomnia, weakness of muscles, blackouts, extremely strong pain, and having no help. Then my psychologist diagnosed me with BPD based on 3 weeks of strong emotional symptoms, which my doctor finally found out as side effects of rheumatological treatment. Either way, I took the diagnosis very seriously, so I started searching for some information about borderline. I found a great psychological blog written by a Polish team of DBT therapists, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I was completely unaware that there is a therapy so focused on giving great solutions to the patients as DBT is. I printed a skill training, which is used during group sessions, and was available for free in my native language. I started doing it step by step, week by week. I was getting new knowledge and applying new skills with my eyes full of tears because of pain and feeling so disheartened. My therapist was not interested in my progress at all. He did not give me any support, just simply told me that BPD would demand a long time of treatment, maybe even more than 10 years. Nevertheless, I was determined to help myself, and I saw that DBT is really evidence-based. After around 2 months, I noticed my first profits. I was able to reduce my physical suffering and live with it more effectively. I also learned how to manage emotions, which occurred as an effect of my previous therapies. In the same time, I stopped working with my therapist and decided to find someone who works with DBT methods. At the beginning of March, I started my individual online DBT sessions with a lovely Polish psychologist. She made a reliable diagnosis and explained to me that BPD doesn't appear for 3 weeks only, especially that my symptoms disappeared within 2 days after I had stopped taking my rheumatological drugs. Although I have no mental diseases, I continue my DBT because it helps me to create the best environment to function with my painful condition. I've really wanted to join a group as well, but unfortunately there are no online groups in my clinic. A few days ago, I found your podcasts. Your podcasts are just like group sessions for me, and I love closing moments. Aw, again. I also appreciate that you told your own stories in the very first podcast. What is really beautiful about DBT, the therapists use these skills as well as patients do, and very often they got psychological help in the past. I have the thought that it creates a great atmosphere with no judgments, full of empathy for everyone who needs help. I always say that in DBT, nobody is a broken toy. Because of my condition, I won't be able to return to my previous occupation, which was very physical work. Hence, I applied to the School of Applied Psychology in Cork and hope to join you, by you, I mean all DBT therapists working all over the world, in a few years. Experience of having an unhelpful psychotherapy convinced me to help people who meet the same harmful challenge. Keep up with the good work.
Ah, it was such a sweet email. And I think there's a couple things that, even though this listener doesn't have a question necessarily, but I think there's so many things that are really important in this email to point out. And one is that it can be so important, especially if you seem to have mental health symptoms kind of just seemingly spring up out of the blue that aren't really related to any particular event or trigger or situation in your life. The importance of seeing if there could be a medical diagnosis related to what could be going on for you. That's what it was for this listener. That's not going to be the case for everybody, but that can be something to get looked into, to check out, and to see. Because if you can treat the underlying medical condition, then your mental health stuff that you might have been struggling with for a little bit might clear up or be lessened in some way. So that was one thing that stood out to me reading this email. And the other thing that stood out to me was so much the importance of finding a therapist that's a good fit for you, because this listener had a really bad experience in therapy the first time, and then thankfully fired that therapist. That's the, it sounds extreme, but basically told that therapist, I don't want to work with you anymore. And went on to find another therapist that it sounds like was so much of a better fit. And, I feel really fortunate because I've been working with my therapist for, something like over 4 years now, and I have no clue.
For 9 now.
Yeah, you've been with your therapist a long time too. Yeah, so I think we both got lucky. Well, I don't know, Kate, maybe you can speak to this of your own experience. But for me, this was like, I sought out therapy when I was in college at the college counseling center, but that was very time limited because it was at the college counseling center. You're not going to be at college forever. I think I probably met with her about 10 times or so, and she was fine, she was good. But when I decided to go back to therapy, I feel like I got really lucky in finding a therapist who was a good fit for me, because my criteria is basically like who is in my area and who takes my insurance. And the first therapist I looked into checked both those boxes, and I gave her a call, and that's who I've been working with ever since. But it is so important to do your research into who this therapist is, how they practice, to set up time to talk with them over the phone and ask any questions that you have about who they are, how they work with their clients. And if you really feel like therapy is not helping you, I can't urge you enough to say something. Tell your therapist, I'm feeling like this isn't working for me, and maybe you guys can course correct it, or maybe you can't, but that's going to say a lot about your therapist in that moment, how they address your concerns. And if they don't address your concerns, please find another therapist. There are lots of people, unfortunately, who they don't find their best fit with a therapist right away, and then sometimes they just never go back. And I'm so glad that this listener kept pushing forward to get help and found someone who was a better fit for them. And I think it serves as an inspiration that if that's been your experience of I worked with this one therapist one time and it was horrible, so I've never gone back, please consider going back if it's something that you want to do, and trust that you can hopefully find a therapist who will be a better fit for you. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
No, I like that a lot because, I don't know, I think of it, therapists are people too.
Yep.
And there's never any guarantee that any two people are actually going to get along, right? And that includes you and your therapist. Right? So if you just don't feel that connection, that sort of might sound like a weird word, but really that chemistry between you and the therapist of it being a good fit, exactly all the things that Michelle said, don't necessarily blame therapy as an idea. It may just be that you didn't connect with the right person. I've had, I think, 4 therapists over the course of my life, and I've had 50%. 2 of them were terrible fits, and 2 of them were great. So, it just depends on what it is and how you feel in the room. Another thing I just wanted to connect to is I know the listener said that they didn't have much in the way of other mental health issues after they changed the medications that they were on and things like that, but I did also just want to connect to this idea of becoming a therapist, in part because of your own negative experiences, and being motivated to help people because you were helped. I definitely have run up against times in my life where I felt uncertain. I felt, anxious or insecure about being a therapist, considering I have had and still have my own mental health issues. But Michelle loves this line. The way that I reassure myself when I'm thinking this is, you know what? I would rather learn about sex from a prostitute than a nun. And so the way I think about that is hopefully having my own issues helps me relate to my clients in a way that, maybe I wouldn't be able to without them. So I think having been through, bad therapy and good therapy, listener, you're going to make a really good shot towards becoming your own therapist, because you have had that experience of connecting, and you've had the experience also of struggling, which I think brings a lot to the table. And then it's not really, apparently I just wanted to all over this person's email, but especially just the line about how in DBT nobody is a broken toy actually made me tear up a little bit. I thought it was the sweetest thing, and I love it. I don't know. I hope so. That's always the goal. Nobody is a broken toy here. I always say that's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. Is a thing I say to my clients a lot, and I think that's a really important message, so I'm glad that's coming across.
Yeah, I loved that phrase too. It really seemed to hit the nail on the head. So, all right, let's see. Next one here. So this one says, Kate and Michelle, without going into too many details, I have a 16-year-old daughter that has been in and out of psych hospitals the past 3 years. She self-harms amongst many other things. As you can imagine, it has been a very stressful few years. I've been reading books such as I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, and Borderline Personality Disorder, A Family's Guide to Healing. DBT is a common thread. She also started DBT recently. On a quest to understand her illness and how to help her, I've been trying to understand what it's all about. I came across your podcast this week and started listening. These are skills I'm applying to myself as well as to help her. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Mental illness is a scary thing for parents, and you are breaking it down into bites I can understand. I also just joined your Facebook group. Yay! So excited to start this journey of healing. Aww.
Oh, I know.
So much us.
Today. I don't know. I just want to say good job. Good job, listener. Good job. When I went through DBT all those years ago when I was 19, so a little bit older than this listener's daughter, but still a teenager. My parents weren't really involved. They, thank goodness, paid for it. Could not have done that as at 19 years old, but they weren't learning the skills. They weren't kind of immersing themselves in what I was going through, and I think that could have been really impactful and really beneficial to me, to have a parent who was that committed to kind of learning with me, growing with me, and helping, connecting with what I was going through. So hopefully I just want to say thank you so much for your kind words, and also, thank you for being such a good parent.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those things that, they say this sometimes in the therapy world as well, kind of hearkening back to the other listener's email about wanting to become a therapist and things like that, of like, don't recommend things to your clients that you haven't tried yourself. And I feel like even though neither Kate or I are parents at this point in our lives, but it's something too that I feel like that can really apply to parenting, of like, don't tell your kids what to do unless it's something that you're maybe also willing to do or work at with them to help them, and you are totally practicing what you preach. It's amazing. And also thank you for mentioning a couple books. So I'm just going to repeat the titles in case people want to look into them more. This listener mentioned I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. And the second book they mentioned was Borderline Personality Disorder, A Family's Guide to Healing. And, I'm about to shit on myself, which I should not do. There's another shit. I should read I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. I really want to read it. Because it's one of the most well-known books out there about borderline personality disorder. And I haven't read it yet, and I want to. So I have had many clients read it. I have had nothing but good things really said about it. I've never heard anything negative about the book when people have read it. So that can be a great one. And yeah, that second book I also have not read, but it sounds like that's really geared towards parents. So that seems like it could also be super helpful. So thanks for mentioning those.
There's also Stop Walking on Eggshells, if we're mentioning
book titles
that are really well known, at least.
Yes, that's another really well known one. Yeah, about borderline personality disorder.
I haven't read it either, so I'm guilty there.
Yeah, maybe at some point we can agree that, like, you'll read one and I'll read one, and then we can talk about it. Yeah, definitely. Okay, I think we're on to the last one.
Okie dokie. So, let's see. I'm from Australia. I found your podcast on Spotify. My psychologist told me that DBT skills would be helpful for me, but she only does cognitive therapy. I have been listening to your episodes every morning at work while doing letterbox drops. My job is very hard work, and your podcast has been soothing, to say the least. It keeps me going to work, and during this weird time with COVID-19, quitting a job without another to go to is not an option. I've been using Wise Mind, Half Smile, Open Hands, Check the Facts, and Opposite Action. I have big feelings and moods and find it hard to differentiate what is a fact and what is something I have created. Coming from a background of instability in the household growing up, how do you work out what emotion is valid, that comes up, and what may be anxiety, depression, etc., taking the steering wheel in your brain? Thank you. I work in real estate, and my boss is very critical. She is constantly moving the goalposts and being emotional. It's hard not to take it personally when you make a mistake at work, or to be on edge when you feel like you get yelled at around every corner. Please keep making episodes. I'm finding them very useful, and I love listening.
Thanks. So I don't know, the first thing that stood out to me reading this email was just with how you describe your boss. I mean, obviously, we don't know you personally, listener. We don't know your boss. We don't know specifics about your childhood. And what immediately stood out to me, though, is that it's very likely that your boss is touching on maybe some triggers from your childhood. And this happens sometimes where, you know, just because we've grown up and become adults, it does, you know, we are still very susceptible to encountering people in our lives, whether it's at a job or in friendships or in partners or whoever, who can very much remind us of our parents or just other like hard traumatic things that we faced growing up. And that's what stood out to me, is it seems like your boss may be hitting on some of that for you. So in terms of what could be helpful here, because, you know, your main question is, how do you work out what emotion is valid that comes up, and, you know, what's basically taking over the steering wheel in your brain? And especially when you're around your boss, and we might have said this in a previous Q&A, but I think it bears repeating here, of just noticing and doing this from a non-judgmental stance, but noticing when your boss is, you know, treating you a certain way, or saying something to you that's overwhelming for you, just noticing which state of mind your boss may be in at that moment. Is your boss in their reasonable mind? Is your boss in their emotion mind? Or is your boss in their wise mind? And just notice. And notice the same thing for yourself of which state you're in, whether it's reasonable, emotion, or wise mind. And let's be honest, when other people are in their emotion mind around us, especially, that it's easy to pick up and feed off of that energy. And just notice if that may be part of what's going on. Like, am I sensing myself getting pulled into my emotion mind because that's where my boss seems to be? Okay, maybe that's it. And it can also be helpful to, if you have, you know, Kate and I sometimes put it like a trusted other, somebody at your job who you're really close to. I mean, you say that you do letterbox drops, and that leads me to believe maybe you might be a postal worker of some kind, which might be working more in isolation. But if you have a coworker that you can lean on, somebody who you trust, somebody who seems to be like a positive, supportive person, and if your boss is just having a day, or you're having a day, or whatever it is, and you're trying to tease out like how much of this is an issue within myself, how much of this is not within me, but I'm getting triggered by this other person, going to a trusted other can sometimes be helpful to just say, you know, is it just me? Or is this what's really going on today? And seeing what they say. Sometimes getting that validation can be helpful from other people. Again, I think it's really important that you're choosy about who you get that validation from, and that you also still make an effort to validate yourself first. If you can, try to see the situation objectively. But if you're really struggling with that, then getting another perspective may be helpful. So, yeah. What about you, Kate? What do you think?
So I will say, I'm pretty sure they say they work in real estate. I have no idea
Real
what
estate?
box drops are. Yeah.
Oh, I totally missed that. I'm sorry, listener. That's true. You do say I work in real estate. I guess I got hung up on letterbox drops at the beginning. Okay, never mind.
So there you go.
Sorry about that, listener. I work in real estate. Gotcha. Ooh, which is a high-pressure environment sometimes.
Yeah, it is. So, man, I have so many different things. How do I wrap them into a coherent order? Let's see. I'm going to start with the thing that I put in, all caps in my brain when I was reading it, which is all feelings are valid.
Yeah.
They're all valid. All your feelings are valid. You have the question, which emotion is valid? Yes, that one.
Every single one.
Every single one. No matter the source, right? It doesn't matter whether that feeling is coming from anxiety, depression, or other stuff that, might be considered, mental illness or mental, health issues, or if it's coming, I don't know. By trying to think, oh, well, I wish people could see the giant air quotes I want to put around this. I don't know, would a healthy person be feeling this way in this situation? Would a normal person be feeling this way in this situation? Giant air quotes, biggest air quotes. Those questions aren't helpful. It's just going to lead to you shaming yourself about it, right? I think I was actually saying about one of the other entries earlier, this idea that, oh gosh, I've gone and lost my thought. Well, that was good. I'm going to get around to it again. I'll find it eventually. Right, so all of the emotions are valid no matter where they are coming from. It doesn't matter how someone else would be feeling. This is how you're feeling. And shaming yourself around it is just going to add more problems to the pile. So, first question is, no matter where it's coming from, your feelings are valid. Oh, there you go. I was going to say, it's not what happened to you, or you're not broken, it's what happened to you, right? So, however you are feeling makes sense. I promise that how you're feeling makes sense. It makes sense because of who you are and the situations you have experienced before. Like Michelle was talking about, it sounds like your boss might be triggering stuff from childhood. Let me raise my hand and say, been there, for that one, right? And so even if, a different person with a different history might not feel the same way as you are in that situation, doesn't make how you're feeling in that situation any less valid. If there's anything that I want to have, I hope you get from our response to this is just, they're all valid. How you're feeling is valid. And to start with validating it is actually going to give you a much bigger leg up for regulating it and helping yourself calm down than to try and do this weird, sleuthing. Is this a real and valid emotion, or is this just my mental health issues, right? That's gonna derail you a lot and possibly, cause you to feel embarrassment or shame, which is just gonna make things harder. So that's one big thing. And then kind of my last thought, actually two thoughts. One is, awesome job on the skills.
Oh, yeah.
List of stuff. Check the facts, opposite action. Some of that shit's hard. So, good job. I just wanted to give you a big thumbs up. I mean, if you're trying that stuff, you are already obviously committed to trying to do your own work. Which brings me around to my last point, which is one of my favorite things to say is how someone treats you says a lot more about them than it does about you. Right? And I don't know if having that little mantra in your head can help when your boss is doing all of these things that, personally, I think would be hard for anyone to deal with.
Yeah.
In a boss, no matter their background. Right? This says more about her than it does about me. This says more about her than it does about me. Right? As a way to give yourself a little bit of a shield against, as you put it, taking things personally. So those are kind of my thoughts there. Michelle, before you wrap up, I have a random thought. We never said that anybody that we talk back to that has questions and stuff in a Q&A episode, I would so love to hear how it went. Yeah,
this is true. This is very true.
Write us again.
Write us again. Yep.
Write us again. Tell us how it went. Tell us if it helped. Tell us if it didn't help. Don't feel like you only have to send nice stuff. I want to know. I want to know so bad.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. Yeah, because we do. We throw out these suggestions. We hope that they're helpful. Especially, I would love, in particular, I mean, all of you listeners, right? You're great. But especially the first one who was talking about the stuff at the hospital that she works at. it would be great to hear if implementing some of that winds up making a difference with your patients. If you notice anything different in how they respond or how easy or hard it feels for you to de-escalate them. I mean, yeah, we'd love to hear back when we make suggestions of if we're actually headed in the right direction or if we're off track. That would be helpful. So yeah.
My random thought today.
No, I like it. Yeah, write back to us if you've already written in with feedback, or write to us for the first time. DBT Me Podcast @gmail.com, and hopefully we'll be back soon with another Q&A. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in to your Facebook